May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So have you ever noticed how we remember some people's names instantly, while others just fade into the blur of that man, that woman, or the poor? Names matter. They carry weight. They tell us that someone is more than a category, that they are a person with a face, a story, and dignity. In today's gospel, Jesus tells a story about two men. One is rich, living lavishly, dressed in fine linen and feasting scrumptiously every day. The other is poor, hungry, and covered with sores, lying outside the gate of the rich man's house. The rich man goes unnamed, but the poor man has a name, Lazarus. Both men die. Lazarus is carried by angels to the bosom of Abraham, while the rich man finds himself in torment. From Hades, he pleads for relief, asking Abraham to send Lazarus with a drop of water. When this is denied, he begs for Lazarus to go warn his brothers so that they might change their ways and avoid his fate. It's a sobering story. And there are two things immediately that struck me. The first, Lazarus is named. Jesus lifts him up from invisibility. The rich man remains nameless. But the poor man's name resounds through history. That alone tells us where God's attention lies. Secondly, this parable feels a bit like Jesus' version of A Christmas Carol. Think about it. The rich man, suffering, wants someone to go and warn his brothers, not unlike Marley's ghost, who comes to Scrooge with a warning, sending three spirits to show him the way. Marley's penance is to try to save Scrooge from his same fate. In the parable, the rich man longs for Lazarus to play that same role. So if this is a kind of gospel Christmas story, Christmas carol, what can we learn if we think about the ghosts of the past, the present, and the future visiting us today? Well, the ghost of the past reminds us where we come from. For Israel, the past is rooted in God's covenant with Abraham and the giving of the law to Moses. That covenant was not just about being chosen in a narrow sense. It was about becoming a light to the nations, a community marked by justice and compassion. The law established practices that made Israel an alternative community, different from the empires around it. Every 7 years and every 49 years, debts were forgiven. Land was restored. The captives were freed. This sabbatical and Jubilean vision meant that the social, political, and economic order itself was meant to be reorganized around justice. It was a way of life that stood in contrast to Egypt, which had enslaved them, and to Rome, who would later occupy them. When Abraham says in the parable that the brothers already have Moses and the prophets, he is pointing back to this radical call. You already know what God requires, he says. The prophets cried out for justice, for the widow, the orphan, the stranger. Jesus himself took up this mantle. In fact, in the synagogue at Nazareth, He declared that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him to bring good news to the poor, release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, the Jubilee year. It was not just spiritual good news. It was a social, economic, and political vision, and it was threatening enough to get him killed. The early church wrestled with this too. In Acts, we read of believers holding possessions in common and caring for one another so that no one was in need. Paul described the church as the body, where each member shared in the well-being of the whole. The past, then, is not a story of private religion, but of a people called into radical communal justice. That is the ghost of the past. That is the ghost of our past, reminding us that our faith is built on a covenant of justice and compassion. Now, when the ghost of the present arrives, he shows us what is right at our door. Remember, Lazarus lay at the gate of the rich man. The rich man stepped over him day after day until it was too late. Our own presiding Bishop Sean Rowe recently preached a homily where he said something striking. We are not called to enlarge the circle to include the marginalized. Rather, the marginalized are to be the center of our life together. That's not an add-on. That's the heart of the gospel. Yet how often do we, like the rich man, not see those who are in need right in front of us? Sometimes it's because we don't want to see. Sometimes it's because we have watered down our mission until it fits neatly into the culture around us. Sometimes it's because it's easier to associate with those who look like us, think like us, or make us comfortable. But Lazarus is not a category. He is not the poor in the abstract. He is named. And so are the Lazaruses in our world: the unhoused, the immigrant, the elderly, the LGBTQ community, people of color, transgender youth, the disabled, the hungry. These are not named statistics. They are named and known by God. The ghost of the present asks us, who is sitting at our gate today? And do we see them, or do we step over them on our way to the feast? Finally, the ghost of the future arrives. In Dickens, this ghost shows Scrooge the consequences of his life if nothing changes. In our gospel, the rich man already suffers those consequences, and he pleads that others might be spared. What about us? What does our future hold if we ignore Lazarus at our gate? Presiding Bishop Rowe recently said, I think the institutional resistance is now more important than ever. The church may be one of the few institutions that will be able to stand up and tell the truth along the way. Not to fold to demands to continue to make compromises on our moral decision-making. That is our future, if we choose it. To be a people who resist the culture of consumerism, injustice, and oppression. To be a community that tells the truth when truth-telling is costly. To be, as Israel was called, to be a light to the nations. This is not simply about individual morality. It is about realigning ourselves as church with God's radical alternative vision. It is about embodying justice and compassion in ways that may make us odd, countercultural, even inconvenient. But it is also what makes us faithful. So today, the ghosts of the past, the present, and the future speak again to us. The past reminds us of a covenant people called to justice and compassion. The present asks us to see those at our gates and to center the marginalized as named and beloved. The future challenges us to resist, to realign, to shine as a light in the midst of darkness. Like Scrooge, we are given the gift of a warning. Like the rich man's brother, we have Moses, the prophets, Jesus, and the witness of the church. And like Scrooge, we are given a chance to respond before it is too late. The question is, how will we respond? Who will we name? And will we see Lazarus right outside our gate, as Christ calls us to see him, not as stranger, but as our sibling, as beloved of God?